In this video, I'm going to answer your top 3 most embarrassing questions about how to use Copilot in the GitHub Copilot CLI or command line interface. All the stuff you've been too embarrassed to ask, wait no longer. It gets answered today. Let's get into it. All right, the first embarrassing question is, how do I actually launch the GitHub Copilot CLI? Well, the first thing you need to do is you're going to need to run VS Code on your desktop. So I assume you already know how to do that. Next, what you're going to do is up here in the top ribbon, you're going to click Terminal, New Terminal, and once this loads, give this a second here to run through its paces. All right, all we need to do is type in Copilot. And once we do this, this is going to load the Copilot CLI. Now, what's the difference between using the CLI versus the chat here to the right? We can get into that in more detail in a future questions you're too embarrassed to ask video. What I like is that it lets me go through a plan mode and then into autopilot. So that is how to launch the CLI. So it is going through its paces. It is trying to connect to some of the different MCP servers that I've got connected in my agent harness, and we are just about ready to go. So that's how you launch the Copilot CLI. See you in a second for the second question. All right, the second embarrassing question that you have been too ashamed to ask in GitHub Copilot CLI is, how do I know which GitHub Copilot account I am logged into? Now, when you use the chat window here to the right, if you click here on the Copilot icon at the bottom, it tells you which account you're logged into. Now, this does not carry over to the CLI. The account that you're logged in here in the chat is not necessarily the same account you were logged into in the CLI. I found that out the hard way recently when I made a very expensive donation to a project with my own personal GitHub Copilot credits. So how do you check that? Well, there are 2 ways to do it. The first way consumes tokens. I can simply ask, which GitHub Copilot account am I logged into? And it's going to go away and figure this out for me. Now, because I am using natural language and it's starting to put a plan together, you can see that we are starting to consume AI credits and tokens. Now, it's not going to necessarily use a lot of tokens to do this, but we want to use them responsibly. We want to use them intelligently. We don't want to necessarily just be using them willy-nilly. So here it is. I am logged into this account. Awesome. Let me show you how to do this without consuming tokens. So the other way to do it is to simply say / and user, and I'm then going to say user show. And this is going to show the active user. And I didn't consume any credits. And this is the account that I am logged into. So that's how you can determine which GitHub Copilot account you are using in your CLI session. Again, / user show. And that tells me which account without consuming any AI credits. All right, let's get on to the third question. All right, the third question that you are too embarrassed to ask about using the GitHub Copilot CLI is, how do I actually change the model? Now, in the lower right-hand corner of the screen here, it tells me that I'm using Claude Sonnet 5. But how do I actually change this? When I first started using this, it defaulted to 4.6, and then suddenly it's using 5. And I have no idea how it did that, why, or how to change it. Believe it or not, this is incredibly easy. All I need to do here in the command line interface is type / model. And what this is going to do is this is going to let me see all of the different models that are available to me. So I can scroll through them. I can see up here at the top, which is really useful, I can see how many tokens it uses, what's the cost, and it gives me a nice summary here, medium cost versus Going on to something like Opus, which is going to be a higher cost because that's a more comprehensive model. GPT 5.5, again, high cost, but it lets me compare the costs of some of these different models that are available to me to use in my interactions with the Dataverse coding agents in the GitHub Copilot CLI. Now, some of the things that I am intending to experiment with over the next few days and weeks is the idea of using some of the higher cost models like Opus or GPT 5.5 for the planning. Use that to do the thinking and planning. And then once you've got a plan, switch to a lower cost model, such as Microsoft's own My Code One Flash, Claude Haiku, something like that, to do the actual doing. Once you've got a plan and a markdown file, it's just simply a matter of following instructions. And so you don't necessarily need a high-powered model like Opus or GPT 5.5 to just simply follow the steps of the plan. So that is something I'm going to take a look at to see how that works for me. At the moment, I'm just defaulting to Claude Sonnet 5. Something interesting I noticed is that Sonnet 4.6 is actually a little more expensive than Sonnet 5. Go figure. But that is how you change the model. Again, all you need to do is just escape out of that, is type /model and hit enter. And this is going to let you scroll through all of the different models. Now, you can set the reasoning as well. So you can determine whether you need high, low, medium reasoning, max, extra, extra high. It defaults to medium, which seems to work pretty well for me at the moment, but it's something to play with. So those are the answers to the 3 most embarrassing questions you might have about using the GitHub Copilot CLI. Firstly, how do I start the GitHub Copilot CLI? Secondly, how do I know which GitHub Copilot account I am logged into? And finally, number 3, how do I actually change the model that the GitHub Copilot CLI is using for its response? I hope that was helpful. Go do something awesome on the Power Platform today, and I'll talk to you soon.